Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Today we have a very special guest in David Icke joining us from the Isle of Wight in the UK. How are you, David?
I'm good, mate.
That's all right. Now, we're going to cover off a lot of topics here today with David. We're going to look at what's going on around the world in terms of the monetary system, what's going on in Syria. We're going to take a look at the royal family, among a few other topics, and then we're going to ease on out with the look at the nature of reality and what's this whole life and death thing about? What's this 3D reality about? Now, where did you want to kick off today, David? What's front and center of your mind?
Well, wherever you want to go. If you want to start with what's happening now, it's almost kind of surreal for me at the moment because I'm seeing my books from years ago basically read on the television news because excuse me. When you uncover this agenda for the world, which is being manipulated into reality by the day, by this hidden hand behind global politics, banking, military, business, big business, you can predict the future for the simple reason that if you uncover what this hidden hand wants to do in terms of changes in the world, and nothing intervenes to stop that agenda happening, then you're going to predict the future because it's going to happen. And the whole point of what people like me do is not to have people saying, oh yeah, he said that would happen and it's happened, look. It's actually to stop it happening by alerting people to the fact that these events in the world that have dramatically world-changing, life-changing changes in the world are not random. And so when I say, look, I said this was going to happen and it's happened. I said that was going to happen and it's happened. It's not so that people will go, oh yeah, he's good, isn't he? It's to say, look, if I knew it was coming and it's happened, then it must have been planned before it happened. Otherwise, how could I say it was going to happen, and then it happened if it wasn't planned before? And so when you apply this to, say, Syria, what's happening is not random, and it's certainly not to fight terrorism. It's an agenda that's unfolding before our eyes. And what they do is it's what I call the totalitarian tiptoe. They start at A, and then they know they're going to Z, but they know if they go in too big a leaps, then people are going to look up and say what's going on, because the changes are so massive and so blatantly going in a certain direction. So what they do is they go from A to B to D and in the biggest steps as they can, but not so big that people will look up from the game show and say, what's going on? So to hide the fact that there's a pattern, to hide the fact that there is an obvious step-by-step journey we're being taken on in a very deeply unpleasant direction, they have to try to make each step appear to be random and in and of itself. And if we apply this to what's happened, not just in Syria, but in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and in Libya, and so on, it's a wonderful example of what I'm saying, because what we're told is that these were random military interventions based on things that were individual to those countries. So you had Libya, with the invasion of Libya, because that's what it was in effect. The mass bombing of Libya to protect the civilians from violence who were under the bombs was promoted as a dot, as a step, individual in and of itself, because Gaddafi was killing his own people and they had to protect his people by bombing them from the sky. And then you had Iraq, that was Saddam Hussein with weapons of mass destruction. And so it goes on. They've used the Libya excuse for Syria, basically. Assad's killing his own people. We must protect them by destroying the country. So this is what we're told, Philip, that these are individual random events in and of themselves. So let's go back to September 2000 in the United States, when an organization called the Project for the New American Century, which is known as a neocon organization, a neoconservative organization, which was behind the Bush administration when it came to power. This Project for the New American Century had among its number people like Dick Cheney, who very soon after September 2000 became Vice President of the United States, in fact, President in truth. I mean, you know, anyone who thinks Bush was president, you know, I've got rights to the Golden Gate Bridge to sell if you want to buy it. And you had people like Paul Wolfowitz, who became Deputy Secretary of Defense. You had Rumsfeld, who became Secretary of Defense, and so it went on. And this organization in September 2000 produced a document calling on America to instigate military instigated regime change in a series of countries. And these countries included Libya, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Iran, and included China and North Korea as countries of great threats to the world. They said that that this should be done by what they called multiple theater wars to make these regime changes. And they also said in that document, which is immensely relevant, that for this to happen, for these regime changes to happen with military, United States military intervention, they would need what they called a catastrophic and catalyzing event like a new Pearl Harbor. Remember, this was September 2000. A few months later, these same people came to power with the Bush administration. And 9 months after they came to power, now we're in 2001, 12 months to the month since that document was published, came 9/11, which Boy George Bush called the new Pearl Harbor. And as a result of that, they have justified the so-called war on terror, i.e. war of terror, to pick off these countries. Now, there's another element to this. General Wesley Clark was a big military guy. He was a supreme commander of NATO at one point. And he was interviewed on an alternative television program in 2007. And he told this story, that days after 9/11, he went to the Pentagon and met the bigwigs. And one of the people he met was a general that he knew on the Joint Chiefs of Staff. This is the group of generals that run the Pentagon, well, in theory. And this general told him that they were going to invade Iraq. We're talking days after 9/11 in 2001.
Mind you, Iraq had absolutely nothing to do with 9/11 whatsoever.
No, exactly. And, of course, right up to the invasion of Iraq in 2003, Bush and Blair were saying it's still possible to sort this out if Saddam Hussein will give up his weapons of mass destruction that didn't exist. When they had planned this all along. This was in my books years and years ago, that all this stuff. But actually it came out through Wesley Clark, a mainstream general, which gives it massive credibility for the general public. Clark said to this general, why are we invading Iraq? The general didn't know, because the information in this cabal is so compartmentalized, so fiercely locked off and firewalled off under the process of only if you need to know it, do you know it, that even at that level of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, this guy was clearly clueless on what it was all about. So Clark went on to say that a few weeks later, he went back to the Pentagon and met this same general and said, why haven't we invaded Iraq? I thought we were going to invade Iraq. And in his words, the general said to him, it's worse than that, sir. And he picked up this document, which had just come down from Rumsfeld's office, the Secretary of State for Defense. And he said, this says that we are going to invade 7 countries in 5 years, and among them, Iraq, Libya, Syria, Iran, the usual story. And so what I was talking about earlier with these random happenings, it's Gaddafi, so we've got to do this. Oh, it's Assad, so we've got to do this. These are just excuses for public consumption to pick off this list of countries that has been around for a long time, and it's been planned for a long time.
Absolutely.
And what's vital for people to see when they look at the world is that we are watching a plan unfold, an agenda unfold, which is based on the constant and ever more extreme centralization of power in all areas of our lives, because this is a simple equation. The more you centralize power, the fewer people have more control over more people. And the more you centralize power, the more power you have at the center to centralize even quicker. And so the process of centralization gets faster and faster, to the point where we actually gave it a name some time ago, now globalization. This agenda is also involving the constant acquisition of more and more land and resources. And, it's multifaceted, which is, what I'm going to talk about at length when I come to Australia in July, to talk around Australia on all these subjects. And so the key thing to start with is these major world-changing events are not random. They are planned, and not planned from yesterday, planned decades ago.
Absolutely. And to back up what David's saying, you can actually look on Google, Wesley Clark, 7 countries in 5 years, and you can actually see him coming from the words of a 4-star general. And also just to back up as well, like we know now with the Hillary's emails that have come out recently, that the invasion of Libya was all regards to stopping Gaddafi's gold dinar, which obviously would have rivaled the US dollar. And when we look at other countries like Iraq, Iran, and Syria, they also moved away from the US dollar to the euro in terms of trading oil. Now, we know the petrodollar is key to this cabal, if you want to call it. It's one of their main mechanisms of control. So any country that seems to want to go against this is one of the ones that gets picked off, as we've seen.
Well, the thing is, if you think about control comes down in the end to choice. And what the system does is give you the illusion of free choice while fundamentally dictating what those choices are. So if I offered you a cake or an apple, I'm giving you a free choice.
So you're talking,
but actually,
right, this to like the political system as well.
Yeah, exactly. There's more choices to eat than just a cake and an apple. But the cake and apple choice is constantly promoted as free choice. And if you think about it, in the world as it's currently structured, choice overwhelmingly comes down to access to money. How many people, you say to them, what do you really want to do in your life? Well, I want to do this. I want to do that. Well, why aren't you doing it? I ain't got the money, mate. So if you can control and limit the amount of money that people have access to while you hoard it all for yourself, I mean, we're now reaching the point of something like, 50% of the world's wealth is owned by less than 1% of the population. This is where we're going. And the reason we're there now, and it's not where it's meant to finish, by the way, it's just where we are now, is because of what I call the Hunger Games society. Where this agenda is heading, unless we stop it, which is the point of exposing it, is to create a society, and people in Australia will recognize this. People in America will recognize this. People in Britain will recognize this. People everywhere will recognize this because it is a global agenda. The structure is for less than 1% at the top of the pyramid, controlling all the world's wealth, resources, and decisions through a world government that wouldn't be elected, a world army, which is being created day by day by the expansion of NATO, a world central bank to dictate all world finance, and a world currency, cashless, and all cash currencies disappearing.
And that's something where, yeah, sorry to cut you off there, David, but yeah, this week it's been in the news where multiple countries, I mean, we've reported it this week on our website. You've got countries all around the world basically calling simultaneously for elimination of certain denominations of their currency. So the euro is looking at getting rid of the $500 euro bill, whereas Larry Summers in the US has called for the elimination of the $100 bill, but then he went on to say we're also looking at the $50 bill. So I think where this is coming to is as central banks are going into negative interest rates, it's going to actually cost you money to put money at the bank. Like the banks are going to charge you fees for the privilege of them holding your money. And if it's, you know, a physical currency system, you're not going to go down to the bank and give them $50 for the interest. But if it's digital, they'll take it and there's nothing you can do about it.
Exactly. And the man you mentioned, I mean, you know, when I was writing my books, his ears must have been on fire, never mind burning. You know, they must have been ablaze, Larry Summers, because when this man speaks, the agenda is talking. And he was fundamentally involved in the crash of 2008. And then he was appointed by Obama as a financial czar at the White House to decide how the crash he helped to create would be responded to. And it was responded to by having people hosing money at banks, which the people then have to pay back. Not that the money existed in the first place, if you look at it more deeply. Yeah, you're absolutely right. So when you see this structure I'm talking about, the Hunger Games society, I call it, because it's very much like the society portrayed in that movie series. You've got the less than 1% at the top of the pyramid. At the bottom of the pyramid, you've got the masses in poverty and subjugation. And when I say that, I'm not talking about people who are struggling financially now and homeless now, though them as well. I'm talking about people who would consider themselves at this moment well off and doing all right, and none of this stuff that Ike bloke's talking about refers to me. Well, I'm afraid it does, because the idea, well, this is the simple thing, Philip. If you're not part of the less than 1%, then they want your wealth too. And so you've got this structure of the masses in great poverty, and therefore subjugation, slavery. You've got the less than 1% at the top of the pyramid that have hoarded all the resources and the wealth and are dictating all the decisions. And then here's the key, and my goodness me, will people recognize this? In between, to keep that status quo as it is planned to be a vicious, merciless police state imposing upon the people the will of the less than 1%. Now, if people would just look at the world and look at how what we call the police are more and more not just acting like, but looking like the military, this is process of that strata of police state holding the status quo indefinitely is happening before our eyes. And the control of money is key because it controls choice. Now, what are the main, most fundamental things that's happened in banking in recent times is this fundamental shift from the bail-in, or rather the bailout, to the bail-in. The bailout was bad enough, which was banks trashing the system and then being bailed out with taxpayer responsibility finance being hosed at them. But what happened in Cyprus what was it, 2011, something about that time, was a fundamental shift. Because when those Cyprus banks fell, they didn't bail out the banks in that way. They went for the depositors' money. And some of those depositors had a lot of money in those banks, which they didn't have afterwards. And this was the crucial shift, because if you are going to target the wealth and money of those that are not currently struggling, then you've got to have a mechanism for going to that money and simply taking it. And this is what the bail-in is all about.
So they're going directly for people's money now.
Yeah. So what they had in Europe at that time was a guarantee through the European Union and in Britain naturally as well, that if a bank crashed, you would get, well, in Britain, I think it was about £85,000, something like that. They would guarantee. Anything else you would lose in a bail-in. They've just reduced that to £75,000 in January, just gone. And that's part of the process now of reducing that guarantee to zero. And anything in the bank above that guarantee goes in a bail-in, which is exactly what happened in Cyprus. There are a lot of Russian people who had a lot of money in those banks, and they lost vast amounts of money, something like 80% of it and more. And the idea is to have a 2008 crash on steroids and use that in reaction to it, what I call problem, reaction, solution, to go for depositors' money. Because people put their money in the bank, and they used to say when I was a kid, oh, put your money in the bank, safe as houses. Well, when you deposit money in the bank, you're just an unsecured creditor. That's all you are. Yeah. And in fact, if you look in detail, they own the bloody money. They own the money.
They own the money and they charge you the interest on it.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. And they're creating money out of nothing through fractional reserve lending, where they can lend vastly more than they actually have on deposit. So it's all a scam. And if you control money in this world, you control choice. And if you control choice, you control people. And this is how it's going. And the idea is to create this situation. Well, I mean, for instance, just today in Britain, they have announced a review of pensions where they plan in the not too distant future to, instead of as now, if you're a woman at 60 years of age, you get a pension, a state pension, which you've paid into. They're not giving you anything. If you're a man, you get a state pension at 65. They've now already in the past agreed that it's going to be higher than that very, very soon. And both, I think, will get one at 65, and then it's going to go up 66 and whatever. They've just announced today that, and when they announce it in the way that they do, what they're telling you is this is what we're going to do, is to take it up to 75 and then onwards, but 75. So if you want a world of slaves, and the only way you're going to get any money in this madness is to work, and by working that means serving the system overwhelmingly, and there is no way that you can get paid a pension which might give you a chance of some rest at the end of your life, then that means you come out the womb a slave, and well into your 70s, and it's going to be beyond that until it's not at all, you are a slave to the system. And if you don't serve the system, then you don't eat, and you don't have the ability to have a livelihood. And this is, I mean, for every day, I'm seeing these stories pass through my website, and I'm going, Hunger Games Society, Hunger Games Society, Hunger Games Society. And they're all different stories about different things, but they're all pushing the world in the same direction.
Absolutely.
And of course, this stuff we're talking about with the Middle East and the terrorism and what have you, and the big, massive migration crisis in Europe, they're all excuses to impose the police state to keep order and protect people from terrorism. You know, like I said earlier, it's what I call problem, reaction, solution. You create the problem, you get the reaction from the public, do something, and then you offer the solutions to the problems you've created, which is to change society in the image of the agenda of the Hunger Games society. It's so, once you get a certain grasp of the picture, the world is an absolute open book. And that's what I'm presenting when I come to Australia, this picture in which it all happens. And people who haven't, come across the information before, they will leave and be able to read the world immediately in a way they never have before.
Absolutely, and we'll be putting links below for people that want to go see the event dates and whatnot and get some tickets to see David. Personally, I went to see him in 2011, and you go for 10 hours, David, talking about a range of topics. I mean, we're only covering the tip of the iceberg here, but you really go into depth. And I think for me especially, and a lot of people that I know have come across your work, they might know one aspect of things isn't right, like the wars aren't right, but they don't see how it links together. And I think what's really important with the work you're doing and what other alternative media outlets are trying to do now as well is link those dots. So like you're saying, they're trying to implement this problem, reaction, solution. But what we're finding now, tell me if you agree or not, is when they're trying to push through the media to get people to react a certain way, it's not working the way it used to work. Like people are starting to, I think I'm starting to see a bit of a awakening. What do you think, David?
Oh, absolutely. I'm now in my 26th year of this work. And when I look back, not 26 years, when I look back 10,
yeah, how's it changed over the years?
5, it was nothing like it is now. Because they don't suppress information for a laugh and a bit of a joke. They do it because without it, their whole house of cards comes crashing down. We chatted before we started talking, and in the presentations in Australia and in my new book, Phantom Self, I start out with something I call the program. And this is explaining how the perceptions of self, the world, life, and reality are uploaded to people from virtually the moment they leave the womb right through to the day they leave the world. And it's this program which forms the belief system of the vast majority of people. And when you break it down and you observe it, I don't care if you're far right or you're far left or you're far center in terms of your political view of the world. They are different aspects of the same program because there's so much, while they disagree on a lot, there's so much they do agree on. For instance, let's come back to a simple thing. They will agree that the world is solid. It ain't. But quantum physics has shown that. And so here again, if you believe the world is solid, you believe immediately in vast extremes of limitation, of I can't, of that's not possible. But once you realize that this is a illusory reality, it's holographic in form. It's a bit like the decoding the wireless internet into the pictures we see on the screen. They appear to be something on the screen, but the internet in that form, graphics, pictures, words, only exists on the screen in that form. Everywhere else, it's in some other form. In fact, in the great majority of cases today, it's an energetic field we call Wi-Fi. That's where all the information is that is decoded by the computer to become what we think is the internet, which is what we see on the screen. Our reality is what I call a cosmic internet. It's a quantum computer. That's what the universe is. I break all this down in the talks and in Phantom Self. And thus we are interacting. It's an interactive cosmic internet. And the body is what I call a biological computer. And I've been writing about the fact that the body's a biological computer for a very long time, many, many years. I nearly fell off my chair the other day. I saw a mainstream scientist talking about the body, and he said it's like a biological computer. I nearly fell off my chair. And what this biological computer is doing, and I explain all this in detail, is interacting with this cosmic internet, just as the computer in front of me now is interacting, well, not here, but in many other places, with a wireless field. And our state of perception, for reasons I explain in detail, dictates what level of this, if you like, cosmic Wi-Fi field that we are decoding. In other words, the world that we perceive to be real to us. So once you are programmed to have a solidified view of the world, it becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy, because that's the level you will interact with this cosmic internet on. And your experience will be that your reality is real. But when you open your mind from this program and you start to see that the world is far different to the way you thought it was, then that expansion of your perception of possibility makes you interact with this cosmic internet field in a much wider spectrum. And so you start accessing insight, understanding, intuitive knowing, simply observing a situation where this person will say it's that, but to you, it's completely different. For instance, what I've just talked about in terms of Syria, most people will still, though it's changing, you're right, absolutely right, will see Syria and Libya, etc., and the banking system in line with what the system has told them to believe about it. But someone who's willing to expand their vision of possibility and look at other possibilities, they will see it in a completely different way, like the way I've just described it. And so when we talk about people awakening, what does that mean? It means awakening from the program, awakening from the download from cradle to grave that is telling you what to believe about everything. And once you breach the walls of the program, it's like bursting a bubble. Suddenly, whoa, why didn't I see it before? It's so obvious what's going on. No, but you were in the program before. I mean,
this bubble gets
computer
burst.
in front of me, this computer in front of me, if it was programmed, as it is, because all computers are, to read information in a certain way, you try to have a conversation with this computer and try to get it to see that it's possible to decode that information in a different way. It won't. It can't, because its whole perception of reality, if you like, is that the way it's always decoded is the way things are, but the way it's always decoded is simply because that's how it's been programmed to decode. And staggeringly, this is what is being done to the human race. And so what...
and how's that being done, David?
Is to break that program.
Can you give people can you give people some ideas of how this is being carried out? Like you're saying, it's being carried out cradle to grave, but obviously, we have to take some responsibility. We're complicit in it, but how can we help wake others up that are still trapped in the system? Like what's actually the control system, if you like? What are they doing to keep people? We touched on, they're working so many hours that they don't actually have the time to stop and look around and think about things. But what other things are being used or have been used in the past that, are controlling people? What's happening now with that?
What I think is very effective is what I'm going to do when I come to Australia, and what I do in Events of Self, etc., is to just go through the human life program to show where these perceptions come from. Because when you see it, you can start to realize why people think the way they think. It's the same as I've just described. If all this if all the information that is downloaded on this computer in front of me leads to a certain perception of things, then the computer, even if it could think, is not going to have a different perception, because perceptions come from information. They come from experience. They come from observation. And therefore, if you can control the information, just as you control the information going in this computer, you will control what appears on the screen in terms of perceptions of reality. So if you look at it, you come out of the womb, and immediately around you are parents. Parents who have been through the same system I'm about to describe. And they are going to pass on, overwhelmingly, that reality they have downloaded through this process to their children. Not because of malevolence most of the time, but because they think that's the best thing, because they've been persuaded it's the best thing. And the idea, and this is why children are going into formal education earlier and earlier, the idea is to get them through that parental period where there's still the opportunity for influence from parents who haven't bought the system, and get them in the education system. So if you think about it, I mean, you know, it's what I've been saying for, God, 20 odd years. Take a deep breath, take a step back, look at it again. People are looking at the world like this all the time. And that's how they are meant to, according to the system. But when you do that, you go, it's all bullshit, isn't it? Yeah. No, what do you mean it's all bullshit? What do you mean? Look at it. So let's look at it in this fashion. You are consciousness. Your awareness. This is our prime state, not the body. That's just a vehicle.
So right now we're talking about the hardcore reality. What is life? What is this whole thing about?
Yeah, we are awareness, the state of being aware. Everything else is a uniform, if you like, to experience. For instance, my awareness is not operating directly within the frequency band of the world that I'm living in now. And let's get that right for a start. People look at the world, and I say to them, when you look around you, can you see everything there is to see in that space? And they go, yeah, of course I can. Well, no, they can't, because the only frequency range that we can decode through the body computer, again, into a visual reality is called visible light by scientists, and it is so narrow, it is laughable. It is just breathtakingly narrow. Everything outside that frequency band, we cannot see. And so we are virtually blind in terms of what we can see. So what happens is, if my awareness, my state of being aware, is going to experience and interact with this reality of tiny band of frequencies, then I have to have an outer energetic shell that is within the frequency band I wish to interact with. Otherwise, I can't. I can't pick up those glasses. If my pure awareness tried to pick up those glasses, you couldn't, because the frequency of the glasses is so dramatically different to the frequency of pure awareness. It's the same principle as if your radio is tuned to radio 1, you're not going to interact with radio 3 or 4.
Absolutely. And it seems almost like our human bodies are designed, whether you want to believe in a God or whatever it is, we're almost designed to interact on this level, but we're limited. Like, to quote Aldous Huxley, he says how basically the brain is actually a filter of reality. So when you have people like, if you want to look at savants, who basically, they're either born with it or they'll receive a head injury, all of a sudden they've got these gifted abilities, whether it's mathematics or they can see things that other people can't. So this is actually being confirmed to an extent through science, with near-death experiences as well. So it seems like the body is limiting our consciousness for a purpose, perhaps. But like you're
Well,
saying, we're something more than our bodies.
well, one of the things I go into in the books and in the all-day talks in Australia is to talk in detail about why we are so limited. Um, I think we are limited. I mean, 26 years of full-time research has actually shown me, I would say, that we are limited because we've been manipulated to be limited. Because if I want to stop this computer reading certain information and levels of information, I can program it so to firewall it off from that information. So to the computer, that information simply doesn't exist because it can't access it. And I would strongly suggest that this biological computer, because that's what it is, has been systematically programmed and firewalled off to stop us accessing the true infinite levels of reality and perception that would otherwise be we would be able to tap into. And what happens when people go into out-of-body states, into near-death states, into ayahuasca states, into meditative states, they are taking their point of observation, their point of awareness, into other levels of reality beyond the program, and thus they get insights, inspiration, and awareness that shows them that this world is anything but solid and anything that what we call quote real. Now, if we get down to the foundation of all this conspiracy of human control, it is to hijack that point of attention and lock it into the five senses, so that the vast majority of people in their conscious awareness are constantly seeing the world through the five senses and filtering it through the five senses. To get a fix on the world at that level of the five senses, where are you looking? Where are you looking to get a fix on the world at that level? Education, the media, government, corporations, and the system in general. And so if we come back to this process that I was talking about, you leave the womb, and parents with a five sense focused, overwhelmingly, not all, perception of reality, then start downloading that sense of reality to the child in its very formative years. Within no time, I mean, your infinite awareness, having an experience, you've come into a reality, and within 3 or 4 years, you're sitting at a chair in front of a desk with an authority figure called a teacher telling you when you have to be there, when you can leave, when you can eat, when you can go to the toilet, what's right, what's wrong, when you can talk, when you can't. And then the program really gets underway through the education system, the programming system in truth, right up to higher education, where now people, young people, go into debt for much of the rest of their life to pay for their own programming. And debt equals control, of course. And you go through this process called education. And all the time, you are downloading the system's version of everything. And you are then told to regurgitate that onto an exam paper to be dubbed a success by telling the system what it's told you to believe. And woe betide if you challenge the system. You are a disruptive child. You are suffering from a childhood behavior problem. We must give them drugs to sort it out, and so on. And the idea is that by the time you come out of this process, you have downloaded the perception of reality of the system. Underpinning that constantly are your peers who have been through the same program, and they are confirming that your download is true. And the media is constantly telling you that your download is true because that's controlled by the same system.
So it's this
Then,
reinforcement of the same
exactly,
system perpetuating itself.
exactly. And then you go out from university and you become a doctor, you become a lawyer, a politician, a judge, a scientist, etc., a teacher. And you go out into those professions which form the reality of the mass of the people with that core programming in place. So, simple example, a journalist, when there's a medical story, will not go to an alternative practitioner because their programming tells them that's nonsense. They'll go to a doctor, and the doctor will tell the journalist what the pharmaceutical industry has told them. If you want to talk about reality, you won't go to someone who's studied reality with an open mind for 26 years. You'll go to a scientist who will give you the official version of reality, which is basically, yes, if I have to admit it, says the scientist, if I really have to admit it, if you get a gun out and I have to admit it, then yes, quantum physics does exist, right? And yes, all right, they have shown it's not physical. Okay, got it out of the way? Yeah, okay. Now, the world is basically physical, right? This is how it works. The worst nightmare of mainstream science is quantum physics. A wonderful, wonderful example. We have a guy in this country, I'm sure you've heard about him in Australia, he kind of gets around the world, called Professor Richard Dawkins.
Yeah, yes.
He's written various books. He is obsessed with the fact that there is no life after death. There is no credible explanation for alternative methods of healing. There is, it's simple, and I explain it in the books. And anything alternative is nonsense, and the world is basically solid.
Just to stop you one sec there, David, I actually sent a tweet to Mr. Dawkins a long time ago. I was trying to offer him that I'd pay for him to go down to Peru and do some ayahuasca. And
right.
Because I think that he's a very smart man. Like he does raise some very valid points regarding religion, but then he's very fixed in his other views. And I think it's one of those things we need to be open-minded, because once you have one of these ayahuasca or out-of-body experiences, as many people have had, I know, I've had, and you've had yourself, David, you realize actually that how much we don't know. So to think that we know everything, like we're just, me and you, like right now, we're just trying to get information of what's current, what we know. But I mean, obviously that's going to expand over time. And having entered these realms, or whatever you want to call it, you realize there's a lot more going on than what we can even imagine. As Terence McKenna said, it's more wild than you can imagine.
There's that great quote from Socrates, and Confucius had a similar version, and there have been many through history. Wisdom is knowing how little we know, because that keeps your mind open. Once you realize you think you know what there is to know, or what you need to know, then you're in the box. And what this wonderful thing with Richard Dawkins was that I read a review of one of his books, and the review said that in the book, it was a scientific review, the review said that in the book he said that reality is not malleable, and then said elsewhere that his knowledge of quantum physics was, quote, a bit foggy. Right? Because there's this thing in journalism that people talk about, which is don't let too many phone calls spoil a good story. In other words, you've got a good story, don't make too many phone calls that will actually trash the story's validity, because you've got a good story. Don't talk to anybody else, just print it. And, you know, what the Richard Dawkins of this world do is something similar. They won't go into areas that threaten their very unmalleable vision of everything. And you bring up a good point there. You said that Richard Dawkins is smart. There's a vast difference between cleverness and wisdom. And, you know, one of the things I wrote in a book years ago is cleverness without wisdom is the most destructive force on earth. And what we call cleverness is overwhelmingly a knowledge of the program, the information within the program, and working with that information within the program. So someone will go on a game show or a Brain of Britain program, and they'll get questions about the world, and they'll be very, very good at answering them. And people will say, that guy's really smart. He's so clever. He knows so much. Yes, but ask him about the nature of reality.
Exactly.
Right? Because what we have been manipulated to do is not only download and accept the program, but then to judge cleverness by knowledge of the information within the program. And when you break the program, then you come out of cleverness into wisdom, into knowing rather than working it out. It's like you're standing outside a library and there's a book in there and it will explain what you're trying to work out. And you're walking up and down, pacing up and down, you go for a drink and you're trying to work it out. And I can't get my head around this. And then you walk in the library and you pick up a book and you open the book, and everything that you were trying to work out, you now know because it's in front of you. And this is the same principle as being focused on the five senses. From the perspective of the five senses and the program reality, you are operating with such a dramatically limited range of information and possibility. The great so-called mysteries to this level of life, you simply don't have the information to work it out.
Absolutely.
But once you break the program and you expand your awareness beyond the program simply by starting and saying, I'm going to start with a blank sheet of paper, and what goes on this paper is got to be justified by evidence and experience and not just by what I've been told is true, then you are starting to expand out of the program, because the program is no longer dictating everything that goes on that piece of paper. At which point you start to become instinctively knowing of things and perceptive of things that you were would have completely bewildered you. This is what we call the awakening. It's awakening from the program. It's awakening from the firewalls. It's breaking the firewalls. That's all it is. Because when we expand our awareness, we are simply becoming what we always are, but have forgotten because of the firewalls of the program.
And just to stop you there, David, and interject, it seems like we've forgotten this over time. Like, you look back on ancient cultures around the world. So whether, you want to look at when we're talking about accessing this reality, it seems to be somehow connected with the pineal gland. Like, we see the third eye synonymous in so many religions, whether it's, the Egyptians with the cobra coming out of the pineal gland, the Buddhists, or, you go around the world and all these ancient civilizations used psychedelics. You've got Plato and in Greece, they had the Eleusine mysteries, where they basically took a psychedelic in a sensory deprivation environment to reach enlightenment. We've got Buddha who starved himself basically to reach this state. So it seems like it's been known, but it's somehow been hidden as well at the same time. And slowly it seems to be this is coming back. And when you enter these realities, like you're saying, things seem to afterwards, they seem to kind of flow, or you get access to information that we never had before.
Synchronicity. You've tapped into a level of awareness which is beyond the limitations of the program, beyond the limitations of visible light. And thus your life starts to become a synchronistic series of apparent coincidences, but they're not coincidences at all. That the fact that you are drawing in and attracting electromagnetically on this level information and experience that is putting the truth in front of you. It's interesting you mentioned the pineal gland, because as I've explained in detail in the books, the force that's behind all this knows how reality works, at least at a certain level. I don't think it knows the massive picture, but it knows at one level. Certainly knows that this reality is malleable and is an illusion in terms of physicality. And it also knows and this is repeated in all the different cultures of what we call history, when they're talking about this force, because they all have different names for it and different stories about it, they say that this force is basically terrified of humanity waking up, because then the game's up. As I say in the books, this force to humanity is akin to, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. This force is the one-eyed man. It's not fully expanded awareness, otherwise it wouldn't be doing what it's doing. It's very skewed, very distorted awareness. But for that to control humanity, it has to make humanity blind to its one eye. And that is the process that we're looking at. So it knows the mechanism of expanding awareness. And so it is absolutely no accident whatsoever that fluoride that is put in drinking water and in toothpaste calcifies the pineal gland. No accident whatsoever. You know, I mean, when I come to Australia, I always check, and America always check. Sometimes it's quite depressing when the answer comes back, yes, fluoride is in the water. I avoid it as much as I can. I have my cups of tea made with bottled water whenever I can.
How you were saying before, how we reinforce this. Here in Australia, like, it's bred into us at a young age that fluoride's good for you. So if you ask anyone on the street that isn't awake to what's going on, they'll tell you that fluoride is good for your teeth.
Absolutely.
But if you ask them these questions, and I encourage the listeners to do this, even ask your dentist, ask them, where does that fluoride come from and what effect does it have on the body? I guarantee you they will not know, because I've even rang the water company themselves and they don't know.
Well, you're absolutely right.
We know it's a mining waste. It's a waste product of the mining industry that basically we pay to have it pumped into our water supply.
Of the aluminium industry and others, and it's appalling stuff, it affects the brain, not just the pineal gland, but our ability to clearly perceive reality in general. And if you put this together, as I do, like I say in the books, and I'll certainly do in Australia, and you put it together with GMO, you put it together with chemtrails, poisons that are put in the sky from aircraft, been going on to about 1998 at least. You put it together with the massive, shocking increase in atmospheric radiation in the last 50 years through technological sources. And you put it together with Wi-Fi fields, you put it together with additives in food of multiple kinds, put it together with all the toxins in almost everything people touch, whether they're cleaning the house or putting stuff under their arm. It's all that we are being deluged in toxins, in chemicals, in radiation all the time. And this is distorting the balance, the electromagnetic, energetic balance of the body and the mind that's interacting with this reality. And it's affecting us in enormous ways that are detrimental to health and detrimental to clear thought. And it's all systematic. You know, some people say to me sometimes, you see a conspiracy everywhere. No, I don't. No, I don't. I see a conspiracy with endless faces. Because in the end, all these endless faces come back to the same core. It's all part of the same tapestry of human control. And it's all one conspiracy in the end, but it has many and multiple faces. And another thing I say to those people is, well, do you see any conspiracies? Do you see any conspiracies? Well, I mean, conspiracies are coming to light all the time in the mainstream. Oh yeah, it was a conspiracy to do this. We have laws and illegalities called things like conspiracy to pervert the course of justice. It's a major law. Of course, conspiracies happen, but they don't want to see the big conspiracy. And one of the reasons that they don't see it is because of what we've been talking about, the program. But there's another reason they don't want to see it, and I mean don't want to see it, and that is to accept that even a fraction of what people like me say is true, is to require a total reevaluation of everything people have ever learned, everything people have ever thought, and everything people have ever believed. And another aspect of that is people don't want to face the fact that there is a force that in the end is not human, and in the end does not even have form if you go deep enough. It's an awareness, it's another level of awareness, distorted as it is, that is actually behind all the things that we do see, behind the banking system, behind the political system, behind the food, behind the radiation, behind the transhumanist agenda, which is massively, massively important, indeed crucial to understand what that's about. And they don't want to face that. But if we don't face it, then we'll go on along the road that is now becoming so blatant it's laughable.
I agree with you 100%. I think a big problem we face is people don't want to admit they've been wrong. It's like this ego battle they face. So, like you're talking about before, with doctors don't want to believe whether it's everything they've been taught to believe might not be correct. Or to give an example, I know a lot of my listeners will follow Graham Hancock, and he looks at the history of the world in terms of humanity, and
Right.
clearly that's not what we've been told. Like it just doesn't add up. But it's not like every archaeologist or historians in on some big conspiracy. It's just that they've lived their whole life believing a certain way the world was taught to them, and for them to basically accept it now, at 50 or 60 years old, they have to admit that their whole life was a lie. Their whole identity was built on this being true. Now, if that's not true, that means everything they've worked for their whole life is no longer valid. And I think that's a
Yeah,
hard thing for a lot of people to accept.
it's very hard, and I've come across many people like that. But for me, it's a point of celebration. You know, people should be aware when they begin to wake up that it's not a time to be embarrassed about being scammed all the years before. It's not a time to feel ashamed that you bought the program. It's a time to celebrate that you've broken the program or started to break the program. For this reason, people should be easy on themselves, because the program is so constant, it's so all-encompassing, it's so unrelenting from the moment you enter this world to the moment you leave. It's not something to be ashamed about that the program had you for a while, even a long while. Instead, celebrate the fact that you're one of the lucky ones that has been able to go beyond the program and see things as they are. And everyone that wakes up to any extent starts to resonate a different frequency, starts to broadcast a different frequency, because the program has a frequency range, and anyone welded to the program is resonating by that very definition to that frequency range. And when you break out of the program, you start to resonate to another frequency, a quicker frequency. And everyone who does that is starting to put that quicker frequency into the energetic field, the cosmic Wi-Fi, people call it the Earth's magnetic field, whatever, that we are interacting with. And by doing that, you're helping to break the power of the program within that energetic field.
So essentially,
And as more and more people wake up, and the energetic field starts to change as a result of that that change that's being posted into it, if you like, by awakening people, then the impact of that program upon people walking through this field all the time gets less and less and less and less. If you change the information in the Wi-Fi field, the computer will put a different reality on the screen. And this is what people are doing when they wake up. Just by the process of doing it, They don't necessarily have to stand in front of thousands of people and talk about this information, although that is a contribution. But just by waking up, they're now resonating into the field something different that is different to the program, and making a contribution just by being awake, or awakening, more like.
So essentially, you're saying the hippies had it right all along. Raise your vibration, yeah?
Well, yes, but not just raise your vibration. I mean, this is a point, you know. It's not about kind of walking away. It's not about dropping out. It's about dropping in. Because when you start to get information and a different fix on the world, that is a gift. In this madhouse reality, that is a gift. And I suggest that gift comes with responsibility. And the responsibility is to share that gift, not to go around telling people, I'm Buddha cross-legged on a mountain, I've got it all, you must believe it. But share it with people so they have the choice to see that there are other possibilities for explaining the world and reality and life other than those the system has told them all their lives. So when I woke up, or started to wake up, because it's a process, it's an awakening all the time. You know, there's more and more to expand and to know. The last thing I wanted to do was drop out. I wanted to run at this thing and say, hey, look, this is not how it is. Here's another explanation. And so the drop out, man, kind of mentality, it's a cop out, not just a drop out, it's a cop out. We need more than ever, if people read The Phantom Self or come to the talks in Australia, they'll see how urgent it is now, with loads of new information that's in it, to how urgent it is now that the last thing we need to do, ladies and gentlemen of the world, is drop out and cop out.
Exactly.
We need to get active.
It seems like the next...
When you expand your awareness, the question is answered for you if you listen to your intuition and follow it. The question that people ask all the time of me, which is, well, what can I do? What can we do? When you start to expand your awareness, you tap into levels of awareness that will give you the synchronistic direction that your best contribution will be made. And then the question comes, am I going to go with that because there'll be challenges, or am I going to not because I don't want the challenges? And so many people say to me, well, there's nothing I can do. Well, no, you're trying to persuade yourself there's nothing you can do so that there's nothing you feel you need to do. You're trying to persuade yourself there's nothing you can do to justify you doing nothing. This is a time to get active, but it's to get consciously active, not reactive within the program, because that would just create more and more of what the program wants.
And I think that's a good point. Like, to people listening to this right now, don't just watch this and then leave it at that. Like, take even if it's just a small action, like go down to the shop, buy yourself some fluoride-free water, share this video, look up some of the information we've looked up today. You know, go down to Peru, try some ayahuasca. There's a whole bunch of things you can do, and it starts with small little steps. Because like David's saying, and tell me if you agree, David, it seems like the next 5 years is really going to dictate which way the future of humanity goes. It really seems to be on that tipping point where we've been presented with an opportunity to break ourselves free to a level humanity's never seen before, or it also has the potential to go to a George Orwell 1984 scenario.
Well, the 1984 scenario and the Brave New World scenario is unfolding before our eyes on the TV news. Because those books, as I've been saying for a long time, were not written from pure imagination. They were both written from some knowledge of where the world was designed to go, because this agenda is not made up by the year or the decade. It goes back a very, very long time. And in Phantom Self, I quote an insider from 1969 in some detail as I'm going through the various subjects. And when people, and I'll sort of obviously mention it in the talks in Australia, And when you see what this insider said was going to happen in 1969, and you compare it with what's happening now, it is incredible. It is absolute confirmation that this world is not random, but is actually not just following an agenda, but following it in extraordinary detail when you see what this guy said was going to happen. And you know, the internet was supposed to, or the World Wide Web was supposed to have been discovered or created in 2008. He was talking about it in 1969.
I was actually thinking about this, David. So we went to the moon. Apparently, I'm not saying we did or we didn't, but in 1969, and since then, like, we haven't been back, or our technology hasn't improved. Like, it seems like the technology that must be available is so much more advanced than we're being led on to believe. Like, you think now astronauts will be going weekly to the moon to do testing and training and whatnot. In other aspects, we've seen, like, whether it's cleaner energy, patents being locked up, and it seems like there's a lot being hidden in terms of where the technology is actually at, like you're saying with the internet.
Well, the point about technology, and I've been making it in the books all these years, is that what you see. I mean, people look in the public arena, and they look at all the technology that's coming out, and it's all designed to control. I explain all this. They look at it and they think it's fantastic. Isn't it amazing what we can do these days? Anything whatsoever that you see in the public arena is light years behind what they can do in the underground bases and in the secret projects. Because if you use technology to manipulate human perception, human thinking, human health, the last thing you want is for the public to know about it. Because then when people do uncover it and say, hey, this is what's happening, the general population will go, don't be stupid, you're nuts. They can't do that. No, they can't do it in the public arena. It doesn't mean they're not doing it. Simple things. I've met people over the years in America. I spent a lot of time in America researching over a long period. I've met people that were aware of technology that's come out decades before it came out. I mean, I met a CIA scientist in California who asked to meet me because he wanted to get information out that he couldn't. And he told me that in the secret projects at that time, we're talking the 1990s now, they had the ability to put microchips into people through hypodermic needles in vaccination programs. We now call that nanotechnology. And this stuff is in the shadows, waiting to be introduced at the point in the unfolding agenda that makes it most effective. And this is a point, unfortunately I've got to go soon. I've got
we'll wrap it up in just a sec.
Yeah, but no, it's been great. I've loved it. It's been a joy to do. But this is why all over the world today, and my goodness me, not least in Australia, they are moving towards mandatory vaccinations. And of course, in Australia, it's the no benefits, no jab scenario. In California, it's compulsory vaccinations, and these are unfolding around the world. The reason is this: the vaccinations are so massively part of this whole agenda of human control and mutating the biological computer so it will interact in the frequencies that suit the agenda and not the higher frequencies that expose the agenda. At the same time that it's vital, the circulating of information about vaccinations has, of course, got more and more people to say, hold on, I'm not having my kids vaccinated. So this compulsory vaccination is nothing to do with the health of children. That's just the scam. It's actually the opposite of that. It's the reverse of that, because everything in this world is inverted. The compulsory vaccination is to force people to have this immune system destroying, body mutating crap put into the bodies of kids by law. That's what it's about, and that's why it's universal, and why it's happening globally, and more times it's popping up in different countries.
But I think that, yeah, like we're touching on, I think the good thing is a lot of people are waking up to it and it's facing a lot of resistance. So I'm sure with interviews like this, getting the information out and people looking into these things, it's only going to speed up the awakening, which is ever so needed. So thank you, David, so much for your time. To everyone,
well, that's a great point. That's a great point, Philip, which you made earlier. If people say, what can I do? Well, here's some information packaged, get it out everywhere you can, and you'll make a big difference to a lot of lives. It's just making the effort. That's all it is.
Yeah, and it starts with little steps. So what we've talked on today is just a fraction of what I saw David cover back in 2011. I know since then he's obviously learned a lot of new things, come across more information. So I'll put some links down below so you can check out. You're going, it's not just Australia, you're going around the world a bit, aren't you, David? A bit of a world tour.
Yeah, well, you brought up an interesting point, a very relevant point a few minutes ago when you talked about the next 5 years. I've been saying for a long time that 2016, 2017, 2018 are crucial years in where this goes. And the reason I'm going around the world, literally, and open-ended, so, as other events are offered, I'll go there, is because of that. These next 3 to 5 years are going to be absolutely crucial in where this world goes and where this agenda goes or doesn't go. These are the years that we need absolutely maximum effort in whatever contribution it is to communicate and circulate this information. Because if we don't head this off, and blunt its progress in the next 3 to 5 years, then we are going to find ourselves in a situation where it is very, very difficult to turn it around for reasons I explain in Phantom Self and will do in Australia, and it's to do with transhumanism. That agenda is, I've got a chapter in Phantom Self which I call transphantomism, which is to go beyond the phantom in the sense of holding people in the 5 senses, to go beyond just the phantom self that I've talked about, the program self, into technologically firewalled self, which will firewall incarnate attention, awareness, from infinite awareness in a way well beyond phantom self. Now, this agenda is unfolding all the time. All this technology that people are now addicted to is all part of taking people Pied Piper style along the road to where this is designed to go. And when I come to Australia, I will explain this in detail, because if this is allowed to go anywhere near its planned goal, turning this around is going to be very, very difficult. So we're now in the eye of the storm. We're in the period where we need to turn this around, and that's why I'm going on this world tour, and we'll go on doing it as long as people want to hear me.
Yeah, we appreciate your work, David, and I highly recommend people go along. Like, one of the big feedback points I get through the website is a lot of people saying that they don't know any people near them that are awake and they can kind of team up with to, implement strategies and whatnot. So, I mean, if you head to David's event, you're not only going to get a lot of information or, bring a friend along, try to wake them up, but you're going to be interacting with people there that, think similar to you and they're open-minded. And it's a good opportunity to actually network. And the way I look at it, it's actually exciting times we live in. Like, never before have we lived in a time where you can start a YouTube channel and you can reach more people than some of the biggest revolutionary figures that have ever lived. Like, this is your chance to implement change to the world how you want to see it. So get active, get out there.
It's also the point where what's been hidden is coming to the surface. We're hitting the inversion of the perfect storm, the perfect time when this information is coming to the surface. People are starting to wake up from the program. For all I've talked about today, the talks in Australia and Phantom Self, they are not doom and gloom. They are not doom and gloom. I am incredibly encouraged, and I'm absolutely sure that we're going to turn this around. but we ain't going to do it sitting on our asses. We ain't going to do it contemplating our navels. We ain't going to do it dropping out and copping out. We're going to do it by making it happen. But I'm very, very optimistic.
Absolutely, and I'm sure interviews like this will go a long way. So go see David. I'll put some links down below to get copies of his books. I've got one I picked up a couple of years ago. Once I read this, it really sped up my awakening and just opened up to, like I tried to touch on a lot of points today, just to kind of open up people to more than just, you know, the 9/11, the politics. There's a lot more going on that we can find out about, which obviously David covers and will continue to cover. So thank you, David. Appreciate your time, and hopefully I'll see you in Melbourne. And if not, I look forward to doing another interview perhaps when your tour's finished.
Cheers, Philip. I've really, really enjoyed it. Some great opportunity to get information out, and make sure we have a chat in Melbourne.
Sounds great, mate. I'll see you down here.
Cheers, mate.
See you, David.
Bye.
All right, thanks for watching, everyone. If you want to stay up to date with the latest, visit us at hangthebankers.com. You can subscribe to our newsletter where we can keep you informed, and also join us on the social media platform. Thank you.